Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time to explore the phenomenon of signing players after they did either kind of well, slightly well, or very well at a particular World Cup. Whilst the World Cup should never be used as your primary factor for determining how good a player is, playing well at a particular World Cup tournament can only enhance your reputation and your transfer value along with it. Less than a month after the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, we've already seen Cody Gakpo join Liverpool for around £37 million, following some impressive displays for the Netherlands, and as of the time of this recording, it's looking likely that Enzo Fernandez will move to Chelsea for an eye-watering sum after winning the Young Player of the Tournament award last month. But what about the precedents to those two? Were players who made a transfer after the World Cup able to live up to their hype? Well, in this video, I'm going to take a look at a random selection of 10 signings that were made after the player in question did well at a particular World Cup. Were they a roaring success, an abject failure, or somewhere in between? Let's find out. Number 1. El-Hadji Diouf to Liverpool. We start off with a man who is, quite simply, absolutely reviled at the club where he made his post-World Cup move to. And with good reason. El-Hadji Diouf was named man of the match in his nation Senegal's first ever World Cup game, a shock 1-0 win over reigning world and European champions France in 2002, and just 2 days after that game, Liverpool confirmed that they had signed him from Lens for a fee of £10 million. He had admittedly scored 10 goals in 26 games the previous season, as Lens finished second in Ligue 1 behind Lyon, but to make the signing so soon after one very good game at a World Cup did seem a tad reactionary. He continued to impress at the tournament as Senegal reached the quarter-finals, where they were knocked out by Turkey, before linking up with his new teammates at Anfield after the World Cup. It started off well enough, as Diouf scored twice on his Anfield debut, but he would only score one more league goal in the following 2 years, and 4 more in all competitions. In March 2003, he was banned for 2 games for spitting at a Celtic fan during a UEFA Cup game, and in 2003-04, despite Gérard Houllier playing him 33 times, Diouf failed to score a single goal. He quite famously fell out with Steven Gerrard. Everyone at the club hated him, and Jamie Carragher went on record to say that not only was he the last to be picked in training, but that also he was probably the only number 9 of any club to go through a whole season without scoring. They were finally able to get rid of him when Bolton took him on loan for the 2004-05 season, and then permanently in 2005 for around a third of what the Reds originally paid for him. Number 2. Gilberto Silva to Arsenal. From a disastrous post-2002 World Cup signing to an extremely successful one, Gilberto Silva was everything that El-Hadji Diouf wasn't. Tenacious, industrious, likeable, and good in the Premier League. Fresh off the back of winning the tournament in Japan and South Korea with Brazil, Silva expressed a desire to play in the Premier League, and it would be incumbent Premier League champions Arsenal who moved fastest to secure his services for £4.5 million from Atletico Mineiro. A defensive midfielder who was an expert at shadowing and intimidating his opponent rather than simply tackling them, he immediately became a fan favourite at Highbury, forming a great partnership with Patrick Vieira in the centre of the park. He was instrumental in the Gunners' unbeaten 2003-04 Premier League campaign, featuring 32 times in the league that season, as well as scoring winning goals in 2 separate Community Shields, playing a pivotal role in the club's run to the 2006 Champions League final, and scoring the first competitive goal by an Arsenal player at the Emirates Stadium in August 2006, one of 10 league goals he would score in 2006-07. However, with his playing time reduced in 2007-08 thanks to the emergence of Matteo Flamini and Cesc Fabregas, Silva departed that summer for Greek outfit Panathinaikos, but he had left a lasting impression on Gunners fans who still regard him as a club legend to this day. Number 3. James Rodriguez to Real Madrid. It's such a shame that this transfer ultimately didn't work out, especially given how bright James Rodriguez's star had shone. A man who made his professional debut at the age of 14 back in 2006, he was signed by Monaco in 2013 from Porto as part of a spending spree upon the club's promotion to Ligue 1, which also saw them sign Rodriguez's compatriot Falcao and clubmate João Moutinho, and he was the star man as the Monegasques finished second behind PSG in the league, notching 9 goals and 13 assists in 34 games. At the following summer's World Cup, he was the star of the show, scoring in each of Colombia's 5 matches, including a stunner against Uruguay in the round of 16, and only missing out on the Player of the Tournament award, wrongly in many people's eyes, to Lionel Messi. But he could console himself for the fact that he won the Golden Boot with 6 goals to his name. Real Madrid wasted no time in securing his signature for £63 million, making him the fourth most expensive player of all time at the time, and 45,000 people turned up to the Bernabeu for his unveiling. 17 goals and 18 assists in his debut campaign indicated that Madrid had another Galactico in their ranks. But over the next 2 years, his performances started to wane, he suffered a number of injuries, and manager Zinedine Zidane didn't start him as often as he would have liked. That led to him moving to Bayern on a 2-year loan, but after a sparkling debut season under Jupp Heynckes, he suffered another dip in form in 2018-19, and the Bavarians chose not to take up his option to buy clause. He returned to Real as a peripheral figure, making just 14 appearances in his final campaign before he moved to Everton on a free, where he once again flattered to deceive. As post-World Cup signings go, you could do a lot worse, but for what he promised and brought to the table, he just didn't have the consistency required to become a generational great as he looked like he would be following the 2014 World Cup. Number 4. Zbigniew Boniek to Juventus. It tends to be either midfield or forward players who make big moves following impressive World Cups, and Zbigniew Boniek is no exception to that rule. A Polish midfielder who was an expert at operating between the lines and charging through defences at blistering pace, he started with Widzio Łódź for 7 years, winning 2 Ekstraklasa titles in 1981 and 1982, before exploding onto the world scene at the 1982 World Cup in Spain. There, he scored 4 times, including a hat-trick against Belgium, as Poland ended up finishing 3rd, and he was voted into the team of the tournament. Juventus had seen enough of Boniek to bring him to Turin, signing him in the same summer as one Michel Platini also arrived at the club, and whilst he couldn't quite match the Frenchman's standards, albeit they were almost impossible standards to live up to, he more than held his own. Nicknamed the Bella di Notte, translated as Beauty at Night, by then Juve president Gianni Agnelli, Boniek saved his best performances for the European stage, where he was allowed more time and space on the ball, hence the nickname Bella di Notte, since most of those games were played in the evening. He struck 31 goals in 133 games from midfield, including the winner in the 1984 European Cup Winners' Cup final against Man United, and he also won a Serie A title in 1984, the Coppa Italia in 1983, and the European Cup in 1985, albeit that particular triumph was severely overshadowed by the Hazor disaster that occurred prior to the match starting, which saw no fewer than 39 fans lose their lives. He formed a telepathic relationship with Platini and became a fan favourite, but upon moving to Roma in 1985, some sour comments about the club in the media have forever tarnished his reputation with the Juve fans. So much so that when he was named in the 50 greatest Juventus players of all time list in 2011, fans protested to get his name removed, and their wish was granted, with Edgar Davids the man replacing him. Therefore, whilst he was undoubtedly a success on the pitch and helped Juventus become more popular in his native Poland, events afterwards have ruined his reputation in the eyes of many. Number 5. Michael Bradley to Aston Villa. Probably the least well-known transfer in this list, I had to include Michael Bradley's loan switch to Aston Villa in 2011 for a very specific reason. A no-nonsense midfield all-rounder who is fluent in 5 languages, Bradley impressed for the USA at the 2010 World Cup, in which they topped their group before bowing out at the hands of Ghana in the round of 16. His performances caught the eye of Gerard Houllier, who is making his 2nd appearance in this video, who was managing Aston Villa at the time. The club swooped to sign Bradley on loan from Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 2011 January transfer window, but when asked if he had actually scouted him before securing his services, Houllier said that he had seen him play 4 very good games at the World Cup, which was apparently all that was required. As it turned out, Bradley would make the same number of appearances in his half season at Villa Park as he made at the World Cup, 4, failing to impress in any of them. When Houllier stepped down at the end of the campaign, his replacement, Alex McLeish, decided not to exercise the option to buy clause written into his loan agreement, and the American ended up signing for Chievo in Serie A instead. A perfect illustration of the pitfalls of signing someone based solely on their performances at a World Cup. Number 6. Luis Monti to Juventus. We're going all the way back to the 1930s for this one, and more specifically the very first World Cup in 1930, although I promise there is a reason behind this choice. Luis Monti primarily played as an attacking centre-half, or a defensive midfielder today, breaking up opposition attacks as the front foot defender and instigating his team's own attacks with incisive passes through to the forwards. He was a key player for his native Argentina as they progressed the inaugural World Cup final in 1930, although amidst a hostile backdrop, with death threats even being directed Monti's way should Argentina emerge victorious, La Albiceleste lost 4-2 to their bitter rivals and the tournament hosts, Uruguay. Immediately after the tournament concluded, he signed for Juventus from San Lorenzo, using his status as an oriundo, essentially an immigrant with Italian ancestry, to obtain Italian citizenship, and thus gain a license to play for Juventus. This also meant that he could represent the Azzurri at international level, and he did so, turning out for them at the 1934 World Cup alongside 3 other Argentine oriundi, namely Raimundo Orsi, Enrique Guaita, and Attilio De Maria, although Monti was the only one of the quartet to feature at both the 1930 and 1934 tournaments. His adopted nation won the tournament under a cloud of controversy, given that it was held in Italy under the regime of Benito Mussolini, who did everything he could to ensure that Italy would win, including hand-picking the referees for each Italy game and allegedly wining and dining them pre-match. Monti thus became the only player to play in 2 World Cup finals for 2 different nations, a distinction that he will probably hold forever as a result of various changes in FIFA's international eligibility requirements. Essentially, he was signed by an Italian team after performing well at 1 World Cup so that he could replicate his fantastic performances for his native Argentina for his adopted nation of Italy at their own World Cup 4 years later and lead them to glory. And ultimately, it worked. Number 7. Hazzabhajan to Sunderland. Hazzabhajan is primarily remembered in the UK for one thing: his penalty miss against Uruguay in the 2010 World Cup, which, had he scored it, would have seen Ghana through to the semi-finals. Right up to that point, he'd enjoyed a stellar tournament, scoring a late penalty to earn his side a win against Serbia, equalising with another penalty in their game against Australia, and bagging an extra time winner against the USA in the round of 16. Luis Suarez's goal line handball gave Jan the chance to be the hero in the quarters, but under immense pressure, he crashed his spot kick against the crossbar, and despite scoring in the subsequent penalty shootout, his team ended up losing 4-2. Sunderland had seen enough, alongside his 13 goals for Render previous season, to splash out a club record £13 million on him in August 2010, and he repaid their faith immediately with a goal against Wigan just 10 minutes into his Premier League debut. He would go on to hit 10 goals in his debut campaign, including strikes against Chelsea, Spurs, and the equaliser in the Tyne-Wear derby, but after 3 games in 2011-12, he decided to move to the UAE with Al Ain. Although originally a loan deal, the Emirati club paid £6 million for the year-long loan, with Jan apparently quadrupling his salary in the process, before the move was made permanent in 2012 for another £6 million. Although Sunderland made virtually all of their original investment back, and Jan did okay in his only season on Wearside, he was only really a true success in the financial department rather than on the pitch. Number 8. Keylor Navas to Real Madrid. Keylor Navas is the second player to feature in this video who signed for Real Madrid in 2014, but I think it's fair to say that his transfer was a lot more successful than Rodriguez's. Starting out his career at Costa Rican giant Saprissa, Navas moved to Spain in 2010 with Albacete before joining Levante in 2011. It took him 2 years to become the club's number 1, but he grabbed his chance with both hands, making the most saves out of anyone in La Liga in 2013-14 with 267, letting in just 39 goals in 36 games, and being voted the league's best goalkeeper that season. He continued his great form at the World Cup in Brazil, as Costa Rica topped the group of death containing Italy, Uruguay and England before they beat Greece on penalties in the round of 16 and lost to the Dutch by the same format in the quarters. Real Madrid decided to trigger his £8 million buyout clause to bring him to the Bernabeu, but upon Iker Casillas' departure in 2015, they made a high-profile attempt to bring David De Gea to the club in a swap deal with Navas. However, that transfer fell through at the last minute owing to the required documents not being submitted in time, and the Costa Rican later revealed that he cried throughout the whole ordeal at the way he was being treated. Seemingly determined to prove his worth, he became one of the best goalkeepers in the world over the next few years, with his incredible agility and reflexes making up for his relatively small frame for a goalkeeper of 6'1". He won a hat-trick of Champions Leagues and the league title in 2017, as well as being voted the Champions League goalkeeper of the season in 2017-18, although in 2018, Thibaut Courtois' arrival at the Bernabeu meant that he was demoted to the bench. After a year of playing second fiddle, he moved to PSG, where he now finds himself in the exact same position, this time behind Gianluigi Donnarumma in the pecking order. But when you consider the trophies he won and his importance to the Madrid side, it's hard to deny that Navas' move to Real was anything but a success. Number 9. Oscar Diaz and Ricky Villa to Spurs. Even though I covered the earliest possible example of a player being signed following an impressive World Cup, the phenomenon only really became more mainstream upon Oscar Diaz and Ricky Villa's 1978 transfers to Spurs, so it makes sense to feature the pair in this video. Both men were members of Argentina's triumphant 1978 World Cup campaign on home soil, with Diaz starting every match barring their controversial 6-0 victory against Peru in the second round group stage, while Villa would only make 2 substitute appearances. Spurs manager Keith Birkinshaw signed them in the immediate aftermath of the finals in a move which took everyone by surprise, especially since signing foreign players was so abnormal in the British game at the time, let alone players from South America. No matter, the duo became club icons, with Diaz the more tenacious of the pair and Villa the more creative. The former stuck around for 10 years, albeit interrupted by a loan spell at PSG in 1982-83 following the outbreak of the Falklands War, and he made in excess of 250 appearances and had a song named after him, namely Aussie's Dream by Chaz and Dave, made in collaboration with the Spurs squad prior to the 1981 FA Cup final. However, in that final, it would be Villa who was the star of the show, as he scored twice, including a phenomenal solo goal which was later voted as the greatest goal scored at the old Wembley Stadium in the replay against Manchester City to help Spurs win the game 3-2, and thus the trophy. Villa would only stay there for half a decade, hitting 25 goals in 179 games for the club, but both were inducted into the Spurs Hall of Fame in 2008 in recognition of their incredible contributions to the club, and indeed to the English game more broadly. Number 10. Alexander Golovin to Monaco. The most recent inclusion in this video rounds it all off, namely Russian midfielder Alexander Golovin. He started for Russia at the 2018 World Cup, which of course they hosted, setting up 2 goals and scoring a free kick in their opening game 5-0 thrashing of Saudi Arabia. Whilst he wouldn't be involved in any more goals for the remainder of the competition, his energy and creativity inspired his team to reach the quarter-finals, and he dispatched his penalty in the shootout win over Spain in the round of 16. A host of Europe's elite clubs then queued up to sign him, and it would be Monaco who were the ones to secure his signature for around €30 million, just a year after Arsenal apparently had a bid in the region of £8 to £10 million declined by his then club CSKA Moscow. It really is remarkable what an impressive World Cup can do to your transfer value. Admittedly, he hasn't quite been able to live up to those lofty heights that he set at the World Cup since moving to the Principality, but he remains a key player for the club, registering 51 goal involvements from 155 games, which isn't bad for an attacking midfielder or winger. He's won 45 caps for Russia to date, although it's unlikely he'll be able to win any more anytime soon as a result of the nation being banned from competing in FIFA and UEFA competitions due to the country's invasion of Ukraine. And that just about wraps up today's video, looking at 10 players who were signed in the immediate aftermath of performing well at a World Cup and whether or not they were a complete success or El-Hadji Diouf levels of utter trash. And if you enjoyed this video, of course, please don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and you can ring the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a video straight away. And if you've got any other future video ideas, then let me know down in the comments and I'll do my best to make them happen. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.